Yeah, the amazing Jenny Nash for the treat.
Now tell me where you are located in the world right now.
So I'm in the United Kingdom in the northern end of things, sort of as things get skinny on its way to Scotland. We're in North Yorkshire.
And that are you there permanently? I mean, in your life, permanent is maybe not
Nothing permanent for us, but we've
applicable.
been here. We've been here on and off for almost 13 years altogether.
Oh, wow.
6 years before and 7 years now again. And I mean, here for the foreseeable anyway.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So, um, we're here talking as part of the series that I do on a blank becomes a book coach. And in your case, we have in that slot soldier, but you've done so many different things in your life. You've had such an interesting life and career. So, I wanna start just by asking you how you were drawn to book coaching.
So I came at it a little sideways, as I think a lot of us have done, but I found you the first time, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. You did like a prep class for NaNoWriMo with Grant Faulkner, and you were teaching the prototype of the mini book blueprint, the one-page book summary, and probably a couple of other techniques for getting ready to write. So I saw
Yeah.
you on that video. I thought this is really cool, and I shared some of the resources at that point, but I didn't think much more of it. Um, and then somehow I read Story Genius, and obviously you coached that book, and I tripped over the class for it, which I begged my way into, and I got hooked up with my coach, with Kathleen Furin, as a result of that. And that was an amazing, happy coincidence. Um, and then I listened to every session you did about book coaching and read everything you wrote about it and talked to Kathleen about it. And I wasn't sure I was a good fit. Um, but but what I wanted to do is to build a community of women writing about their military experiences. And I think what I finally decided was that rather than wait to have the community, that I would start with the coaching and use that as one way to achieve that. So that's how I came to book coaching.
And then can you also tell me about your experience as a soldier and what drew you to that and what that time was like for you?
Well, I mean, there's not enough time in the world to answer
Right,
that question. That's
right.
why we have to write about it. I think that's what makes it hard to write about it as well, because it's a very complicated experience. But I was a maintenance officer. I was in the Army. And when I was a young soldier, I got sent to Germany, and I landed in Germany 2 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Oh, wow.
So this is ancient history, right? That's 1 million years ago. Um, but it was such a fascinating time and place that when my service obligation was up, I chose to stay in Europe. And so that's what sort of led to like more than 30 years of living all over the place overseas in Germany and Turkey and Japan and now the UK. Um, so, so so you're right. I've had lots of different jobs. My degrees are in education and counseling. So I think I'm this very not typically unique military combination of itchy feet and curiosity, but also sort of a drive to help. And like all of my jobs have always been in the helping professions and scaffolding the learning of others almost all the time. So coaching was actually, although it probably seems kind of weird, a really good fit for me.
Yeah. Um, and your mission to help military women, it's not just tell their stories, that's part of it, but it might be to write in other ways too, right? Isn't it just tell me, define that for us. Is it you want their stories of being in the military or just to help people who've been in the military to be writers?
Both things. I mean, I recognize that it's very difficult to process one's experience in the military. And if someone chooses not to do that, obviously you don't want to insist that they do. So both things. And I think too that, I mean, the writers that I know and coach who are veterans who are not writing about the military still bring sort of a sensibility of open eyes, right? You can't have been in the military without meeting people from all over the place that you never would have met any other way. And so what I see is that sort of just wider window in what they're writing. And that's super important too. I think that women should use their voices. Part of it is selfish. I'm writing about my military experiences in both narrative, memoir, and fiction. I have no comps, right? I need someone else to be writing about the military so that I have like some people that I can compare myself to. And obviously there are people who do it, but it's not nearly as many women writing about it as men. And so part of my curiosity too is why we don't. You know, when I teach my mini blueprint session, I'm going to spend a little time on that because I'm just so curious about what people's reasons are for. I read some really annoying statistic one time about how many women don't even identify themselves as veterans after they leave the service. And that just really gets on my nerves, right? I think, why not? I want to know why not. Again, they don't have to if they don't want to, but I'm just super interested about why it is that we are less likely to talk about it in whatever form.
So, just for my education, can you name any books by women veterans?
There are a few. Actually, I have a good colleague from where I'm part of a Twitter group called the 5 a.m. Writers Club. There's another woman who is a veteran who is quite well published. She writes women's fiction and romance. Her name's Tiff Marcello, and she's published lots of books, and actually she's coming on the session with me too that I'm teaching. So she'll be there. There's another woman named Elizabeth Lewis who's traditionally published a thriller. And I think her story is about a veteran. It's not somebody on active duty. And there are a number of people who've self-published, and I think there's quite a few veteran writers who write romance, a smattering of thrillers, but really not a lot, not much at all.
And so
Memoir too, narrative memoir.
If you had to guess, why do you think it's true that more men who are veterans than women who are veterans return to writing or publishing?
Okay, so I'm making this up. This is what we do, right? But I think that that the interest that publishing has in military stories is combat centric. And obviously men will have seen more actual combat than women have. Even a lot of the memoir that's published, written by women, have to do with women who've done traditionally combat sort of jobs, pilots, and women who ended up in the front lines for whatever reason. It tends to be what people say they're interested in. There's not, I think there's a feeling, you know, we've talked about the whole imposter syndrome thing recently and forever, you know, that if you haven't seen bullets flying, that you didn't really serve quite as authentically as people who saw combat. So I think that's part of it.
That's interesting. And you also have a background. You were trained as a social psychologist. How does that inform your book coaching?
Oh, I mean, it's everything, right? It's not therapy, but it is therapeutic to write, and it is therapeutic to coach. And so it's such a tender spot that people find themselves in when they come to us. And so I think a lot of listening skills that I am trained in, you know, come in handy in coaching for sure. But then also like certain techniques, like to be real specific, you know, Danny Abernathy, she does a lot of work with the Enneagram. That's something that I know about a lot. And I'm trying to kind of codify what I know because I've worked through it with clients before. Like Danny, it seems to me, thinks about what personality type the writer has and how they might be drawn to certain kinds of writing because of what their sort of predispositions are. But I've helped clients think through their characters, maybe from personality types. And also, if you use the Enneagram, it gives you kind of a nifty growth arc. Like, you start with your dark side and it shows you what your light is as well. So it's useful in terms of plotting. I think gives kind of an organic way to go anyway, maybe not formulaic, but some help with that.
I love that. That's so interesting.
I need to talk to Danny about that. I keep meaning to do that.
Yeah, you should connect with her. Could be really interesting. And in terms of your work as a soldier and your time in the army, what things do you know from that work that you bring to book coaching? What are the skills or talents or understandings or knowledge that from that inform your work as a book coach?
I mean, I think the obvious answer is a certain amount of discipline. I think most people who've served or survived in any branch of service for any length of time just have to be able to get up in the morning consistently and do the hard thing. Like that's just part and parcel of it, right? I'm a longtime member in good standing of the 5 a.m. Writers Club, just because like I'm used to getting up early and I'm used to paying myself first, and making sure that the machine is working. And so obviously that. One thing that I think a lot of people don't know about the military, I certainly didn't know about it until I got in, is that there are a lot of readers in the military. There's this whole culture.
I don't know that. Tell me about that.
Like it's funny. Like there's this whole culture of hurry up and wait, right? So you do all kinds of things to get ready to do a thing, and then you get told stand down, right? And so there you are with your duffel bags and your combat gear all over you, And when people are told to wait, they're pulling dog-eared paperbacks out of those duffel bags and cargo pockets. And I was just delighted to find people that I never thought would be readers, reading and always wanting to talk about their stories that they were reading, it's got lots of time. So in all of these years that we've been overseas, we've always been in military communities. So even if I wasn't on active duty all that time myself, I've always been in book groups. And, to be able to talk to people from all over the world in all kinds of places, military libraries and foreign bookstores and, people's living rooms and government quarters, about all kinds of books for 30 years. That's about the best preparation for book coaching that there is. Like one of my side hustles for a while was as a literary intern, and that has taught me a lot about sort of publishing world. Obviously, Author Accelerator, and you give us amazing training and then amazing ongoing support, which helps us to support writers. But reading and thinking and talking about books for so long, like that's the best way that I know that anyone could learn what a reader wants, and how a story works, that there really is. So I don't know if I've always been a reader, but I don't think I'd have been such a careful reader if I hadn't been around people like this.
Oh, I love that. I'm dying to ask if there's any pattern or tendency that you see in the types of books that soldiers might choose, or is it just all over the map?
All kinds of stuff. I think there's a strong contingent of sci-fi fantasy. Everybody loves their Heinlein. Lots of thrillers, of course. Everyone's read their Clancy's. But all kinds of stuff. Like one of my best buddies when I was in the Army was a West Pointer, and he introduced me to Ann Tyler. So wow. like, I mean, it could be anything. Like people
Right.
surprise me so much all the time.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering about would people in that situation gravitate away from like the Clancy military thriller, more into an escapist sort of realm, or would it be the opposite? Like, could you make that generalization? But it sounds like no, people just read.
all
Right?
kinds of stuff, like all kinds of stuff. And I mean, and there's also like a lot of history wonks too. It's like that gets a little annoying, like you try to make a point about Napoleon and someone's just going to say, well, which one? And you're like, I can't even compete with you guys.
So the other thing that occurs to me in your description of people with their dog-eared paperbacks in their duffel bags, you can't hide what you're reading in those circumstances. It's not like you could read something that would be dark or you might consider if you had something you considered shameful or embarrassing or I don't know, I'm thinking about my Kindle. Like nobody knows
Mm,
what I'm reading on my Kindle. Not that I'm ashamed of anything I read, but I that just seems like a very public kind of reading the way you were describing it.
mm.
Is
Well, okay, so I'm an old soldier, and we didn't have those things back in the day. But I imagine now that soldiers are able to read on devices too, like everyone's got a phone. But also, like the army, even now, from what I see, you lose quite a lot of privacy.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
you're subject to inspection pretty much all the time for
Yeah.
anything. But I never saw anyone. I certainly never corrected anyone for what they were reading.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why that occurs to me. I think of reading as a very private thing, I guess. To me, like it's a thing that I do alone in quiet and private and just feels I guess I feel protective of it in that way and just speaking to you, I'm realizing what a luxury that is
Mm,
to read alone.
this is such an interesting observation. I think, and I might be making this up a little bit, that if you were lounging around an airplane hangar with a lot of people, head propped up on your duffel bag and a book in front of you, that maybe that might also have been a shy person's way of inviting a conversation. Um,
Oh.
I don't know. I'm just sort of making that up.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. So this all of your reading and this years of talking about it with people, you mentioned on your website that you are interested in helping writers. One of the categories are writers who are outside the US writing for the American market.
Mm.
Do I have that right? Am I saying that right? Right. So or stories about Americans who are living outside. So what is that perspective? How is that unique or special or different? How do you describe that sort of expat existence as a for writers?
Uh, well, if I'm understanding what you're asking, for readers, like people have been interested in this since Mark Twain wrote The Innocents Abroad, right? Like all of his mishaps about, dopey Americans in Germany or wherever that was set, when he was living in Heidelberg, I think. For Americans writing about their overseas experiences, in a way, I think it's just a way to process it, right? That's another level of having that experience, coming back through it with a finer tooth comb. But I also think too, like if you've had the great good fortune to live overseas, then maybe for some of us there's an obligation to tell about it, right? Like a lot of us are over here on the taxpayer's dime. Why not share some of what you learned, even if it's just short articles for your newspaper back home? Like I think, you know, you can choose to keep that to yourself, but also you could tell people what it's like. You learn all kinds of things being out and about in the world.
I mean, you it sounds like you've now been away longer than you've lived here. You grew up in was it Georgia?
Yeah. Yep.
And you've been gone and living abroad more than you've been here. Do you still identify as an American? Or I mean, we live in such times that it must
Mm.
be strange to call yourself that in other places now.
Well, I think my kids are third culture for sure.
Mhm.
I am myself an American. I've held that up to the light, in a few different countries now, and realized that no, to my core, I was raised there. That's what I am. That's the lens through which I look at everything. It's an American one. Um, I I had a story come out a few months ago. It was fiction about a woman who was having to move back to Georgia after 30 years of living abroad. Imagine that scenario, if you will, because my husband has had to move back to Georgia actually for work. So we are living geographically separated right now, which is something we've done before. It's not fun, but it's what you have to do. So maybe we're closing that gap a little bit. But in the story, the woman doesn't make a decision. And for me now too, I don't feel like I have to make that decision. I'm also in the great position of being able to choose both and still, while I can still move about.
How is being a book coach, does it facilitate a mobile life? I mean, I know you haven't been one for very long, but how does that work in terms of being able to do it wherever you need to do the work?
That was one of the things that attracted me to it, actually, because I thought initially that I would be going back to the States with my husband. And so I thought, well, I need this job that I can do anywhere so that I can come back to the UK and see friends and family, or wherever we might go next. I wanted something that would move with me. So I think it's quite easy, actually. And I've had, clients from all over the place as well, British, Canadian, American, and already it hasn't mattered where I was sitting when we were talking.
I love that it can dovetail with that life.
It's an easy. I mean, you've got lots of coaches now, right? Who are all over the place.
Yes, yes, it's true. And some of them also, I think that mobility is is what appeals to a lot of people. And it's not just, I know a lot of people now who are working remotely in a traditional office setting, and they're a virtual worker or a remote worker, however you want to describe it. And what we do is that, but it's also not quite the same, because I don't know, I find what's so interesting about the work of book coaching, you're in very intimate relationship with somebody's mind and energy and creative life, which if you love that, feels feels like the whole thing to me. That's the whole thing. I don't feel like I'm missing being in an office, or that I'm remote, or it feels like, well, that's the work. And so being able to do that from anywhere, it's almost like the mobility of it is secondary, I think is what I'm struggling to say. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know. I think I understand what you're saying. And I'm also thinking too that maybe Zoom has taught us all something, bookish people, right? For me, like I'm an introvert also to my core, to be geographically remote from someone, but so intimate in their mind, as you say, like I kind of need that separation. I've had some in-person coaching relationships, and that's been wonderful too. But I think like that's a cool matchup, right? Like having the necessary distance, and also the necessary intimacy in the same package. Like I think this is interesting, Jenny. I need to
It
think
is
about this some more.
no, it's very interesting. And I have had the experience sometimes where I've worked with someone for years and years and years, and never met them. And then when I meet them, it's actually quite awkward. Like we're very when we're working together over Zoom or the phone or on words on the page, there's flow, and there's back and forth, and there's humor, and there's all the things. And then when we're with each other, we're sort of like, I don't know how to be with you in the
Too
same
much, right?
space.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's really interesting. Well, what are you working on in your own writing, and how is that dovetailing with your book coaching work? Are you able to balance them out?
That was one of the things that Kathleen and I talked about the most when I was trying to decide whether to go the coaching route at all, because I still have a day job in the military industrial complex. And so like, I was worried that the coaching would take over my writing brain, because when I've done teaching before, I do find that taps my creativity in a way that is draining for writing. But I think I've got it worked out where, I do them at different times of the day. Like I absolutely clock in and clock out on one, and I'm able so far to keep it pretty separate from each other, which is a relief because I really enjoy the coaching. I would hate to have to make a decision between the two. I wanted them to work together, and so far, so good.
What are you working on in your writing life?
I am mostly a long form fiction writer. I start with short stories and then they just get out of control. I just need to look at things from lots of different angles. So I've got a novel that's in pretty good shape that I'm trying to pitch a little bit. I was hoping to get some more feedback in my initial queries to give me some direction. And that's just not happening. I read what you wrote the other day about your clients who were giving up on querying, and I'm not at that point at all, but I can see like just a lot of very quick rejections without, any sort of resulting information. Like I could see where, it just seems to be the place where querying is right now. So I don't know. It's only early days for me, but it's making me think. But in the meantime, I've got 3 other novel length projects in various stages of work. I've got a couple of short stories and creative nonfiction things out and about.
You sound very disciplined.
I am, Jenny. But also like, I think, I'm the queen of incrementalism, like getting up early, doing even just a minuscule amount of work. I always feel like it's not enough, but I'm always a little bit impressed with how much actually a person can produce when they do that. So like, it's just tiny, but pretty consistent. So it doesn't feel painful. I'm really all about the fun. Like as soon as it starts feeling like a chore, then I have to reevaluate.
And I'm intrigued by the fact that you are not a participant in social media. How are you finding your clients? What is it? All word of mouth? What is the way that's working for you?
Well, I'm on Twitter, but not a lot of. We couldn't meet on Instagram because I'm not there yet. So I've gotten some great referrals from Author Accelerator. I have, people who come to me word of mouth. I am just starting to branch out in my military networks. I have a former client who runs a podcast called Women of the Military, and she interviewed me for that not too long ago. So that's going to come out pretty soon here. I think she's going to promote the mini blueprint session that way.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So a little bit of networking, a little bit of word of mouth, and a little bit of referrals from your good organization, our good organization.
And where can folks find you if they listen to this and would like to work with you?
I am on Twitter at Nancy_Strower, which is Sierra Tango Romeo Oscar Echo Romeo, for those of you who can do. People misspell it a lot, so you have to give it to them that way. And that, or on my website, which is just nancystrower.com. Super simple.
Perfect. Well, let us know when that podcast comes out, and we'll amplify that in our newsletter as well.
Oh, thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, just let us know. And thank you for chatting with me.